Hey guys, Dave and Len here. This is a Wargame chat, and this time we're going to talk about the difference between board gamers, wargamers, miniature players, and role players. We'll start with role players. One thing I noticed about role players is a lot of them are nice people and they're fun to game against, but you get one type which is a really bad type. It's the exclusionary person. Essentially what this person does is they become a DM or they become a player and they try to influence the DM to throw people out of the game that they don't like for some petty reason or something. And what I think is going on is they were a total nerd when they were growing up and they got their ass kicked by bullies and stuff, and they were excluded from all the sports and stuff. So instead of being a man about it and saying, well, I'm going to make sure I treat people well, instead what they're trying to do is they're trying to reflect how they were treated on someone else because it makes them feel powerful. Since they were picked on, they pick on someone else. So it's like the cowardice thing. This is not all role players. This is just a small amount, but I've noticed it in quite a few different role-playing groups. You get people like that. You got any takes on role players?
Well, my main thing I noticed, the people in the role-playing read mostly fiction. They read very little non-fiction. And, you know, they're really into the fantasy, because most of the role-playing is medieval fantasy. And one thing I know, I don't know whether it's the system, it's because of the system or role player. Some of them do have poor social skills, but this is one way to learn better social skills. You know, you're doing what the schools and their parents have failed to do them. And well, you know, you've been in games where some person's obnoxious or you just can't seem to get along with them.
Yeah.
And I was thinking, like, my first time I was role-playing, I was with two guys who just loved to pull off crimes. You know, I would play D&D and kill dragons or do a dungeon crawl. These two wanted to rob, they want to rob the town. I'm wondering, and of course,
that was like my character Chico Hernandez in, what was it, 7th Sea, yeah. Remember that? Yeah, the thief.
And the game master encouraged this behavior, and I'm sitting there, what am I getting into? You know, when the steam tunnel controversy came out, I always thought that some article would have a picture of him saying, evil dungeon master. Yes.
All right, and then as far as board gamers, I'm talking about like Euro players and Ameritrash players, family board gamers and stuff. They're a lot of fun to play against, and they're always, I would say, yeah, almost always nice people. But sometimes you get some that are a little bit too serious. It's like I used to be in part of this one group where we played Euros every Tuesday. And they were nice people, but it's like no one would have any chit-chat during the game. It was all completely focused on the game, and if during the game I tried to have some small talk with someone, I mean, they politely answer what I said, but you could tell by the look on their face they did not want to talk. They just wanted to concentrate on the game. And the other thing I've noticed about some of the regular board gamers is they are completely against player elimination. I mean, the point of like war games, like what we usually play, is to eliminate the other player. But they get, like, if there's like a game where someone leaves the game early because they're knocked out or whatever, they just hate the game, they can't stand it, blah blah blah, and they're like, oh, I hate Monopoly, that's got player elimination. I mean, I'll be the first to admit it, Monopoly's not the greatest game, but it's, I wouldn't consider it a bad game either, but they consider Monopoly the worst game on earth. It's not the worst game on earth. It's a mediocre game that takes a little bit too long, but it's all right. But it's like they try to build themselves up by showing how much of an elitist they are because they don't play Monopoly.
One thing, with Euro games, they usually have a system where no one's really eliminated, and it's set up that even if you start the last turn in last place, there's a possibility you could rally, which is part of, you know, the suspense and fun.
Yeah. Well, one thing with Euros is there's a lot of times I thought I was winning the game, and then when you actually calculated victory points, I did horrible. So that's one. What was that? That Mafia game we played, the board game. It was some kind of organized crime board game. It was really good, but I thought I was winning, and then at the end of the game, it turns out the person we thought was losing actually won because some of the things he did or something were worth more victory points. I can't remember what it was. Can't remember the name of that game.
I'm trying to figure it myself, yeah, because I found that a little too confusing.
Yeah.
That's why that one guy won, because we didn't know. One thing, board games are a complete system. You buy the game, you have to map the counters, the rules.
Yeah, you don't have to paint up any figures or anything, usually.
Appeals, which is part of the appeal. Board games tend to be, there are multiplayer games, but they tend to be solo and one-on-one.
Are you talking about war games now, or?
Yeah, board games.
Well, board games are usually cooperative or competitive. I mean, war games have a lot of solo games. Regular board games have some solo games, but not to the extent that war games do.
Yeah, because I always thought with board games, it's the father of all board games is chess, which is a one-on-one battle. So a lot of times it's like, okay, I'm doing the Eastern Front, you're the Russians, I'm the Germans, let's go.
Yeah. I was never much of a fan of chess because it's a set game, meaning there's a finite number of ways a chess game can be played. I mean, it's in probably the trillions or something, but that's why computers are so good at it, because they can look so many moves ahead and see all your possible combinations and stuff. So basically the guy who wins is the guy who's got the most experience, that can think the most moves ahead. And another thing I don't like about chess is anytime you capture a piece, it's captured. I would rather you roll a dice and there's a way it can defend itself or something, because then you got like a fog of war, so you can't predict exactly what will happen on the next turn, whereas you can in chess, because anytime you capture, it automatically occurs 100% of the time.
Yeah, well, that's part of it. Actually, what's strange is that the strategy, the operations in chess are simple. You just move the piece, but the strategy is complex. While in board games, it's the opposite. The strategy is simple, but the operations, how are you going to achieve this, is complex. So.
Yeah. And then as far as wargamers, I like playing against wargamers. I would say regular hex and shit wargamers are some of the best. I guess you could call they have the best sportsmanship. It's pretty rare you come across someone who's like a whiner, and because they lost or something, they can't deal with it, or they try to cheat and stuff. I don't see that in wargaming. It seems like it's a more mature gaming crowd.
Yeah, because one thing with wargamers, there are a lot of battles that are like one-sided, or one side is favored. And of course you want the underdog, because that's more fun. Now you accept the fact that you're probably going to lose the battle, because the other guy has more stuff or something, some advantage. But if you ever manage to neutralize his advantage and maximize your advantage, and you win, I mean, it's like you love these upsets. So.
Yeah, that's one thing good. Wargamers will play a game they know they're going to lose. Like, let's say it's like some Napoleonic battle or something where you know for sure the French are going to win, and you're not playing the French, so you know you're going to lose before the game even occurs. You can still have fun and stuff and still have a good game. Whereas in other types of games, if people know they're going to lose, they don't even want to play the game.
Yeah. So, one thing is, with miniatures, guys, I noticed, even at the beginning when I started, they always seem to be older. Because miniatures require like more money to start. Now I always envisioned the beginning miniatures as some guy who's been on his career job for a couple of years, 3-4 years. It's time for a nice hobby, and of course miniatures does fulfill that, because usually if you want to fight any battle, you need at least a couple hundred figures, and probably more is better. And then you have to make the terrain. And every war game table is different. Every battle is different. So you need you develop your skills for painting, making terrain, and so on. Sometimes playing is almost like an afterthought.
I would cut the miniature gamers into 3 categories. You would have the Flames of War type players. You would have the fantasy and science fiction players and the historical players. The true historical players are a joy to play against. You have great games and stuff. They have good sportsmanship and stuff. The Flames, people who play Flames of War, they're really, a lot of them are really Warhammer 40K players who are just trying to play Warhammer 40K in World War II. I hate to say this, a lot of the ones I played with were nice people. Some of the ones I played with were just complete whiners, and they would try to set up the game in a way where they'd win before the game even started. Like if they were playing the Germans, they would want to play the. We would play on a long table. They'd want to play the long way, so their Tiger 2s would be close together and stuff and be able to command the whole board and stuff. But then if they were playing the Russians against the Germans, then they wanted to play the wide way, where everything's more spread out. So, and then as far as the sci-fi and fantasy, most of them are good guys, but you get some who are like the tournament types who are, out of a lack of a better word, are complete. And one thing they like to do is they play a tournament game, and they'll play like in Warhammer 40K, they'll pick like Imperial Guard as their forces, and they have like 3 units for every unit of like space, like a Space Marine force they're going against. So the game's won before they've even started. I mean, if they have those Vendetta aircraft, that has more firepower than all the armor in a Space Marine army, and so they've won the game before it even begins, and then they'll play the game, they kick the guy's ass because their force is so much better, and then they brag about it. It's like, it's kind of like bragging when you win at Magic the Gathering, when you have a $250 deck and you're playing against someone who has a $20 deck, and you're like, oh yeah, I kicked his ass. You didn't kick his ass. You had a $250 deck and you had a $20 deck. The guy with a $20 deck probably could actually play the game better than you. It's just he didn't have as good at cards.
Yeah.
But
I remember, was it one guy, that reminds me of one, used to be at the famous Northwestern Wargame Club, which I don't want to speak anymore because I don't know, know how much I should talk about it. One guy named Howard who did Napoleonics, and people didn't like to play with him because he always went to French. He always had the old guard, and they had and me, I like to challenge, and he loved. He had to face someone like me who would actually give him a hard time, even though he did one. Because I still remember one battle. I placed my some kind of lancers, real low level quality lancers, but they were in the line on the one position. If the guards advance, they would be hit in the flank, so the guards didn't advance. He won barely on points because the other side of French. And we had one that was, one thing that I thought was good about, other people were whining about how he sets things up to his advantage, is that he appreciated good play. We did one when we were kicked out of the main playroom. We had a floor of a room, so we had the 2 rugs as lakes, and we had, all of a sudden I was telling them, this is an experience, because we're used to Napoleonics, from one edge of the board to the other. Mm-hmm. We had all these open flanks. It was like a whole big challenge. Naturally, he beat me on it, but he was good at it.
Yeah.
So, now even when he didn't give himself a whole bunch of advantages, he was good at it. So, one thing I was thinking with miniatures, you always play in teams, either at the clubs or at the tournaments. Because the only people I know who play miniatures solo were ones who were testing out the system. Right. Or trying out the battle that they're going to run at a tournament.
Mm-hmm. You can play miniatures solo, but it's so much more fun playing against another person. It's like you said, it's the best when you have teams like, let's say you're having an ancient game and it's like Romans versus, I don't know, Gauls or something. You have 3 guys on the Roman side, 3 guys on the Gaul side and stuff, so it's like a team effort. That's a lot of fun too.
Mm-hmm. Okay, and one thing I noticed with miniatures, since they have to do everything, they have to do their search, get the information, so they tend to know a lot about equipment, weapons, uniforms. In the Napoleonic Wars for 20 years, some people changed uniforms during that period. So you need to know whether the 3rd Hungarian King George Legion regiment or whatever had a when they change from tricorns to shakos and or whatever, that's important to them. Well, with the board gamers, the miniatures, they know all the equipment. Sometimes they're little. They don't know that much about the campaigns, and certainly not about the strategy, just the basics. While the board gamers would know everything about the strategy and the operations and the high level decision making. So that's historical board gamers.
Yeah.
Because actually board games are mostly on operational strategic level, because that's where you make war on a map. So.
Yeah, I prefer like more of the tactical stuff, like small unit combat and stuff, that to be in miniatures than a hex and shed war game. That's why I don't play advanced squad leader or squad leader for that matter. Is for that level of detail, I'll just play a miniatures game.
Yeah. Sometimes it's hard to determine. Something like squad leader, it's got everything but the kitchen sink in it. But other times, it's like how many times do you need to know the fact that the main machine gun jams, you have to roll for morale to everybody what's in the adjacent hex or something like that. There are a lot of like little rules that actually make sense, but how often do they happen? So.
All right, guys, that's all we have for this time. We'll have something new for next week. Have a good evening.